to show the new PDWare7i running right now on Internet Explorer. The thin client itself is certified to actually work with all the major browsers out there, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, as well as IE version 9 and up. This thing is still going to work. The application is still going to work with earlier versions of the browsers. It's not certified for that, but it is going to work. There's going to be just here and there, there are going to be some display glitches like boxes that might be overlapping, but it will work even in earlier versions of the browsers. So I'm going to log in with an account, and right now I'm going to log in with an account that is an administrator, so we're going to have access to everything in the application. But the application itself is actually tailoring the user interface and what is available for different users based on their rights. So since we are actually an administrator, we have actually the rights to everything, so we're going to be able to look at projects and all their elements. We're going to be able to look at resources and everything. But depending on the type of user that you are, the options that are available for the users are going to be a little bit different. And the idea is that it's actually going to help the users to get to the areas that they care about, tackle the information that they want to tackle, make the changes and the updates to the areas that they are actually responsible for, and then get out of the system. So this whole idea about simplifying the user interface, making it easy for the user to get to what they want to work with, it's something that goes throughout the whole application, and you'll see it in a lot of the ways that it actually allows the user to customize the user interface to suit their own needs, again, to make it easy for them to get into the system, do whatever it is that they need to do, and actually get out. We're viewing the system as something that's supposed to help you do your job, but not actually something that you need to spend hours and hours every day being in the system. Beats the purpose. So first what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you how easy it is to actually put certain pieces of information in the application, and basically by just having that information in, you'll see how you can actually get about 70 to 80% of the benefit out of the tool, even with just those simple informations in it. So the first piece of information that you need to have in the system is resources. The resources that you're actually going to track that are working on the different projects. So I launched the Resources tab, and you'll notice that when we go to the Resource tab, we have several elements that relate to them. We have the resource data, which is information that relates to the resources, such as where the resource is coming from within an organization, the different breakdown. We see the resource name, we see their position, and then some other pieces of information that we have about the resources in the system. The list of information, the different type of detail that you actually collect about the resource is totally customizable, it's fully customizable. But there are only basically two pieces of information that are a must in order to have a resource in the system. The first one is where it's coming from, and in this case, you basically have your whole resource tree that you define, your OBS for the resources, where they're coming from, and then the name of the resource. These are the only two pieces of information that are actually required to create a resource. Everything else is optional. So we have, for example, the position, which is the name that we gave in our organization and in this demo database that we're actually using for the skill of the resources. And then we have other pieces of information like date hired and then terminated for people, and the team that they're on, the product team, and so on and so forth. A lot of those pieces of information, again, actually all of them, are fully customizable. You can define some of them as text field, and you'll notice that, actually let me go to something that is a text field, that when you go into it, it automatically reflects how you've defined the field. So for example, the job family is actually a direct entry text field. If something is defined as a date, then the entry is a date control, or you can type in the date. And then as well as lists, they are fully customizable. So for example, a team is not a field that actually exists in the system by default. It's a field that was created to define something for the resources. And in this case, we have team A and B. And these things are fully customizable. You can create as many lists as you want, and up to 60 different fields that you can fully customize with the information that they're going to have in them. So once that we have the resource, and this is the list of resources that we have, the way that we're working with the resources is also customizable. So in this case, we're looking at a certain view that we have that lists all the different information. But as the user of the system, I can actually make some changes to this view And let's say that I don't really care about the cost rate and the bill rate. I can actually hide those columns, as well as let's say that we don't care about the cost center and the X dates. When I'm hiding those columns, actually the next time that I'm going to get into the tool, those columns for me are actually going to be hidden. So they're not going to be loaded the next time we're opening this specific view. Again, it allows it to actually show only the information that I care about, so I don't have a lot of clutter with the information that doesn't really relate to me. It doesn't really matter to the stuff that I'm actually doing with the view. If you want to bring in the columns back into the view, the only thing that you need to do is actually check them back into it, and they're going to come back into the view. Those customization, the customization of hiding and showing columns from within a view are per user. So each user can actually have their own customization of the view, so it's personalized to the way that they're looking at it. The other piece of information that we have to provide for the resources is their capacity. It's basically what is the availability of those resources in the different time frames that we're looking at. In this instance, I'm actually looking at the beginning of 2012 and going for, I think, 24 months. But that is because just of the demo database I'm looking at. That's where we have most of the data. You can actually change the parameters of the information that you're pulling out of the system in the filter spec, which is available for each user, and we're going to go through it a little bit later on. So the capacity is how much a resource is available, and you'll notice that, and that goes through all the different views that we have, is that you can actually go ahead and you edit the information within the grid itself. The information for availability, in this case, we are in percentage mode, so you actually can put it into 1 for full-time equivalent, and then a fraction for less than the full-time equivalent. And that is basically the only two pieces of information that you actually need for the resources. Once we add the projects and how much a resource works on a project, we can actually derive quite a lot of information about the resources, and we'll get to those pieces of information later on. The second piece of information that we need are projects. Now I'm going to launch the project space. So the first thing that we'll see in the project is that, again, we get the list of projects that we have currently loaded from the database. And there's some basic information that we have about the project in this current view that we're looking at. We have the project status, that is a green, yellow, red indicator as far as the project status, general project status. We have the project name, and then some other pieces of information about the project. As far as having a project in the system, which is basically a bucket of where you're actually putting work, you only need two pieces of information. You need the project name, and you need the organization. You need the, well, in this case, we call it organization, but you can call it anything you want, business silo, and so forth. It's basically where in the organization this project is actually coming from. Another good thing to have is the priority, which allows us to do a lot of some more analysis as far as staffing of those projects with the resources that you're asking for, instead of doing it alphabetically, but actually doing it based on priorities. And then that requires that you have the unit priority or the priority field filled in. Everything else that you see is actually fully customizable, and it's optional. So we have the project manager, for example. We have the customer in this case. All these columns that you actually see are customizable, even with their column headers, and as well as the list that they actually have inside them. So we spoke when we looked at the resources as far as the how do we customize a view, and you'll notice that all the views that we have, you can actually fully customize them per the user. But you can also create multiple different views that display different pieces of information for the different elements. For example, when we're looking at projects, we're looking at a current view that we have, but we can also, which is the project main, but we can also switch to the project dates in this case, which will show us other information about the project in this case. And in this case, we see we have the project name, their priority, their state, and then some start, finish, and then some phase dates that we have, the M0 all the way to M6, which is how they call the different phases in this database. When you're actually selecting a view, the next time that you're going to come into the space, either it's project or resource, that view is going to be selected by default, and then the customization that you've done to the view is actually going to be applied as well. So if you've hidden columns, then those columns are going to be hidden, and they're not going to show by default. Again, a lot of that customization, making it easy for the user to to map the view to its own needs. So now that we have the project, the next piece of information that we actually need to have is creating the assignments, putting the resources on the projects themselves. And there are different places that you can actually do it. If we're looking at it from the resource standpoint, then you'll notice that when we are in the resource tab, there is a forecast element. And we're going to go into the forecast right now. So this is the view that we're actually going to be able to create assignments between the resources that we work with and the projects that we want them to work on. So when I clicked on it, you'll notice that I've loaded, in this case, the assignments that we currently have in the system. Again, we're working with 24 months going from the beginning of 2012 to the end of 2013. And you'll notice also that since we are looking at it from the resource standpoint, it's basically loading all the assignments of all the resources that we have. We're working against the projects. In this case, we have about 49 resources, and we see that in this case, we have about 234 assignments with the specific demand that is associated with those assignments. You also notice that in the grid that specifies the amount of work that those resources are supposed to work, you actually have colors. And the color indicates the staffing of that demand by that specific resource or skill. So in this case, we see some of our assignments are actually skill assignments. They're not resource. You'll notice that the resource column is empty. But there is a skill that is associated with them. And in this case, of course, it's going to show it as red because we don't really have anybody working on it. But then when you're looking at a row, for example, for Glover Henry on the project AMCO, then we can actually see that we have some shortfall beginning at February and then actually getting severe as we go further along. So as you're looking at the data for the demand, you're getting the color analysis as far as how much of that demand can actually be satisfied, and then you can actually start doing work also to solve those issues. So this is looking at it from the resource manager point of view. You have all your resources, you have the projects that you have loaded, and then in here you can actually go ahead and make those specific assignments of the resources to the project, and then also go ahead and make changes to that demand within the grid itself. The view again here is fully customizable, and you can change it. In this case, we have two different views. We have the main and the map. You can create as many views as you want for each one of those things. They can be as simple as possible, and they can be as complex with including multiple fields from different areas. From the project standpoint, so if you're looking at it from a project manager's point of view, the way that you're actually going to get into the forecast is by drilling down into the project that you want to work with. So in this case, let's say that we want to work with the Cayman Island project. So I'm just going to double click on that specific row, and it works from every single view that you have. And you'll notice that it actually sends us to a drill down area to the project. It's the specific project space that we have. And the first thing that you'll notice is that you're taking to the forecast tab. This forecast view is identical to the one that you have with the resource. The only difference, of course, in this case, it is actually filtered on that project. And then you have available all the different resources if you want to make assignments of resources, as well as skills, and then put the demand within the view itself, and then work with it. So it makes it easier that if you are a project manager, you only care, or you're looking at it from the project standpoint, you're looking at the project itself, and then you're assigning resources to it. So you're filtering on the area that you want, and then you're putting the resource on them. And then when you're from the resource manager, the functional manager standpoint, you have all your resources, and then you select the projects that you want to assign them to, and then you have a view that is more oriented towards the functional resource manager. Now, once we have all those pieces of information, and remember, we just need the resource and where they're coming from with their capacity, the project, and what they belong to with their priority, and then the assignment with the amount of effort required by the resources and by the resources. Once we have those pieces of information, a lot of the data that you're actually going to see is derived from that. So let's look at some of the pieces of information that we have. The first thing is, from a resource manager standpoint, is the resource utilization. It's basically a straight-out view that actually takes the total demand that is required from each one of the resources, comparing it into their capacity, and then giving you a grid that automatically highlights the areas of problem. Where we have resources that are over-allocated, the grid, that specific cell is going to turn red, and when their resource is under-allocated, which is also an issue, the grid is actually going to be colored with a dark blue. The limits for the coloring are, again, fully customizable and depending on your company. These are customizable by the administrators, and they apply for the different views that we're going to look at. So we saw that we have colors on the effort forecast. We see now that we have on the resource utilization, we also have it on the project demand analysis. So those thresholds for the colors and when they are actually showing are customizable by the company. So you could say that, for example, somebody is over-allocated when they go over 100%. You can say that they're over-allocated if they go over 120% only. So 20% of over-allocation is considered to be normal, as well as for the other thresholds that you have. When it comes to the project, we actually have a couple of interesting areas that you can get the values. First one is the demand analysis, which is actually, when we're looking at it, filtered down into the project, gives you interesting information as far as the demand that is associated with that project that you're looking at, a color highlighting of the different issues with the demand allocation, going from yellow to orange to red as the severity of the allocation increases. And then we actually have information as far as actually how much can be allocated depending on the project priority, of course, and then what is the shortfall that we have. And you also get it in a grid format for that specific project, looking at the time frame that you're looking at. So in this case, we actually see that there's quite a lot of shortfall and allocation. In the different graphs that we actually have, you'll notice that there's quite a lot of interaction that you can do with it. As you're highlighting in the legend, you'll notice that the area in the chart itself actually highlights what area, what element you're actually looking at, as well as that you can filter on the information that you're looking at by clicking on it in the legend itself. The other way that you can look at it from, as far as the project demand analysis, is from the list of projects. And then you can actually go into the project demand view from the project tab. And then basically what you get is the list of your projects ordered by their priority. And again, you can sort it any which way that you want. And you can also add different columns in here if you want to do that. In this case, the view that I have only has the project name and priority and then the dates. And we actually see that as we go down in priority, which is the appropriate way, we're actually starting to have issues with our demand allocation into the different projects. And again, once you see that, you can actually double-click on a project, and then you'll go down to that project space and then see exactly what the issues that you have with that specific project. So let's talk a little bit about the projects that we have when we are actually drilling down into them. So let's look at the Cayman Island. So when we first looked at that project, you notice that several information was actually presented to us. We have the project name, we have the project manager, where the project itself is coming from, as well as other pieces of information, which are the key project indicators that are actually giving us a highlight of the status of the project in different elements. So in this case, we have the overall, which is an average calculation of all the other indicators. We have a budget, which is actually taking, if you have financial information in tools such as the resource cost and bill rate associated with the resources. And then if you're tracking budget, then basically what it's going to do is it's going to take the budget, compare it to the actual cost that you have based on your demand allocation and forecast. And then depending on different thresholds, we'll either highlight it as an issue, which is the exclamation point in a red circle, warning, which is the exclamation point in a yellow triangle, or OK, which is the check mark in a green circle. Schedule is basically to show, comparing to your baseline, how far you're actually slipping the project itself, or if it has moved. In this case, we are OK. Resource, it's your resource plan. If you have any kind of shortfall associated with the resource allocation based on the forecast, this is automatically going to highlight it. So even if you have a very large project, it's very easy just to look at it and know if you have allocation issues. The scope of the project indicator, risks and issues, which is you can actually have the ability to track risk and issue elements to a project. which is a little bit different than the assignment. And then what's the score that actually they have, and then you actually can get that. And then the quality of the project, which is the green yellow red indicated that a project manager can put on a project manually and designate that. Now, if for whatever reason you're actually not using one of those elements, then there is no score for it, and then it's actually removed from the overall calculation of the project. So for example, if there are no risks and issues, then there's not going to be anything in it, indicating that you're actually not tracking it. So we spoke about the forecast, and we looked at the demand analysis. The other thing that you can actually do with the project is something that the project manager can do is actually they can actually build a whole Gantt chart associated with the project itself. And in this case, I'm actually looking at one project. Let's go to something that is a little bit better, more interesting. Let's go to Dominican Republic. And by the way, notice that as you are actually using the application itself and you're opening more tabs and more areas, you'll notice that everything actually opens in separate tabs on the top of the user interface. And what it allows you to do is that if you want to go back to an area that you've been to before, you just need to click on the tab, and that information is there. So you don't need to reload the pages. Again, trying to make it very quick that we don't reload pages every single time that you're doing something and doesn't refresh and you have to apply filters. It actually remembers everything about the location that you've been in and whatever filters you applied, whatever it is that you were doing. So for example, in this case, you see that my scroll bar is all the way to the bottom. It just remembers that, and that was on the utilization tab. And then when I go to the Cayman Island, it'll go to the space that I've been in. And if I was even in the middle of editing something, it's actually going to go into the same state that I was when I left that specific tab. So when we look at the scheduler, the Gantt chart, it's actually quite capable. It's fully synclined, so it's all working on the web. You can create new tasks. You can indent tasks. There's actually quite a lot of things that you can do in here. It is fully user graphical interface. So for example, creating dependencies between two tasks is just dragging and dropping, and then you create the dependencies, and then the information is updated as far as what are the changes that are happening. By default, it is automatically saving all the changes as you're doing them dynamically, so you don't lose everything while you're working with it. So it's, as you're making changes, it is reflecting those changes in the back end, so you don't lose information. In this case, I have disabled it just because we're on the demo database and we don't want to destroy it. There's quite a lot of columns that you can work with. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger for the data area. We've added a huge amount of columns that are available in the scheduler that you can track. You can have mandatory start and finish for tasks. You can have lag. A huge amount of functionality that we did not have before that we've added to the scheduler, trying to make it that if you don't really need the heavy hitting of Microsoft Project, you can actually build a very complete project task plan using the online scheduler that we have. The other thing that we've done is that we've added the ability to create assignments of people to the task and giving them demand. And the way that it works is that actually everybody that is assigned to the project becomes a team member that you can then assign to tasks and then give a certain amount of work percent that they're actually going to be associated with that task. Making changes to this is just opening the assigned resource task and then just putting a check mark next to the resource that you want to work on that task, and then putting the unit, the percentage of how much you want them to work on it. And then just hitting the save and close. Other ways that you can actually work with it, you can double click on a task to open a user interface that is more of a form-based, where you can actually go and make some changes to the information about the task, from the duration to predecessors, resources, assignments, so forth. Some of the things, two new things that we've added to make it very easy. You can highlight critical path very easily just by highlighting that. If you have a very large project task plan, you can actually search for the different tasks in the search bar, making it very easy to filter. And we've included a new thing, which is the new resource histogram, that when you're opening it up, actually shows you the team member underneath the project Gantt chart, and then giving you a histogram as far as the allocation of those resources. And then, of course, when you're going to go over 100% of their allocation, it automatically just starts highlighting it as red, knowing that you're actually using the resources more than they were allocated to the project itself. The way that it works with the scheduler is actually interesting. The availability of the resources, how much they have been allocated in the effort forecast to your project. So if the availability for the effort forecast is the availability of the resource, their capacity, the availability for the Gantt is how much they're actually available in the effort forecast for that project in total. Risk and issues. It's basically a page where you can actually create risk and issue elements associated with the project. When you expand the risk and issue element, you can actually put information as far as description, the actions needed to be taken, and then you can assign it to anybody that is currently assigned to that project. So you can assign it to a specific person, and then it becomes something that is on their workload that they can actually go ahead and work on it, make changes to the action or add stuff to the discussion as far as that specific risk or issue element. When it comes to issue elements, they only have an impact. If it's a risk element, it also has a probability. So the score for an issue is based on their impact, and the score for a risk is based on their probability and impact. The other things that we've added to projects, which we didn't have before, number one is the document space. You actually do have a back-end document area where you can upload specific documents to the project. And then the people that are part of that project can actually go make changes to those documents. They can download them to their machine, and they can upload an updated version. By default, we do have a limit of 4 megabyte size for the document that you're uploading, but that can be changed. Actually, the limit can be removed altogether, and you can have as big a document as you want. The only disadvantage, therefore, of course, is that if you do use a lot of large documents, when you upload and download them, they are, there's a bandwidth that you're actually using, as well as space in the back end for those documents. That might increase as you're using more and more and more. Adding a document is pretty straightforward. When you click Add, you're going to get the user interface for actually selecting a specific, it looks like my thing just stopped sharing. But you basically can select a file from your machine, put a description, and then just upload it into the system, and it becomes available as the project backend space. And the last thing that we have for the project is the discussion, where actually the team members and everybody that has rights to view that project and work with it can actually go and add specific comments to the project and relate to it. Currently, the discussion that we have are flat, which means that they're chronological based in the way that they are displayed. In the next release that we're going to have, this is actually going to be indented, so it's actually going to be a threaded discussion. But you can actually respond and reply to specific comments and create like a whole thread, and it's actually going to show it in hierarchical view. In the first release that we're going to have, this is going to be flat, but that is going to change very quickly in the next release that we have. That's going to be actually during the next few months. So we looked at stuff from the functional manager. So the functional manager is most of the time going to work with the resource view, where you have the resource data, their skill, their capacity, utilization, and forecast. We looked at it from somebody that is more in charge of multiple projects, looking at it from project list and then looking at the project demand, then drilling down to the project. And then you can see that a resource manager is actually going to work with, a project manager will work with their own project spaces. So they'll have them open, and they're going to work with them directly with the project, where they have access to all the elements of the specific projects, which is more drilled down to the different specific elements of the project that they want to work with. Now, once we have all of that, we actually also have the full reporting mechanism that you can launch using our dashboard reporting. These reports are actually fully customizable, and a lot of the clients basically that we have that are hosting this product in-house are actually have multiple reports that they're actually using. In this case, you can actually see that we have only one report in the dashboard called Portfolio Dashboard. But as you add more and more reports, this menu actually expands, and you have more and more options where different reports generate different pieces of information. A little bit about the user interface of the reports themselves is that we have tabs on the top that actually show different pieces of information. We have a date element that allows you to filter on different areas, different date elements that you're looking at. So for example, if you want to look at 2013 and 2014, you just need to highlight those two areas, and automatically the information will filter out to show those pieces of information that you clicked on. And then we have the area for the reports themselves, as well as over here from the left, I'm actually going to bring it into view, which is a filtering area. The filtering area will change depending on what information you actually have in the report. In this case, we see that we can filter on resource nodes, specific resource skills, list of resources, project node, project managers, and projects. But then depending on the different reports that you create or different elements you want to filter on, those filter specs on the left can actually change. The other thing that you can do is that you can actually filter within the information that you're looking at. So if we're looking at a chart and we want to filter on specific elements that we see, like for example, if we're looking at the total demand by project, which actually shows us the staffed allocation to the project, and then the unstaffed, which is the shortfall, and then as well as skill demand that hasn't been satisfied of project. And let's say that we want to filter on those first top 3 projects that we have here. You just need to highlight them in the chart, and then when you do that, you'll notice that the report itself has filtered to specifically reflect information that relates to those specific projects. Now this applies everywhere else as well. So if we go to the skill, for example, the skill report, you'll notice that the information that we're looking at now, which for example shows us that the forecast distribution by skills, so which skills are being used the most, skill assignments compared to resource assignments, so how many skills are actually staffed with these projects and how many are not, as well as giving it in an area chart view. You'll notice that the information that we have here is based on those 3 projects that we have filtered on, and you can actually see it here in the list of filters that we have. So if I remove the project filter that we have applied, you'll notice that we can see quite a lot of different information. What it allows you to do is that you can combine different filtering from different areas to generate something, to generate a report and a view that might give you very interesting aspects. So for example, if we're looking at it at skills and we want to see the projects that are using the engineering skill as well as the regulatory test, I can just highlight this in the area. I'm going to filter on those skills, and now if I look at the summary, these are the projects. So in this case, it's just one project. It's a U.S. Virgin Islands project that we have that is actually using those skills. So, and then if we can go to the headcount or financial and so forth, the information that we're looking at is based on the filters that we have applied in the different tabs. So all the tabs are actually connected. Another thing that we've done, which is new, is we've created a new pivot mechanism that allows you to create any kind of pivot report based on the information that you have in the report itself. So for example, in this case, I create a pivot that has the manager with the skill, the year, and the shortfall. But it's very easy that you can create whichever pivot report that you want and include multiple information, such as, let's say, forecast, shortfall, and the baseline, if we would have had baseline. It looks like we have a little bit of baseline related here. And then let's say that we want to add not the manager, but we want to switch that to the domain. So just like that, I'm looking at the domain, which I have the core business, the new product, and process improvement. I can see the skill distribution. I'm looking at 2014, and then with the values. And then, of course, if I remove the filter of 2014, notice that the pivot table has reflected now all the information that I've loaded, which is 2013. Going forward, we have most of the data in 2013 and 14 in this report. So it becomes very, very powerful as far as allowing the user, even when there is a report, to actually go and customize, create their own pivot reports and so forth. By the way, the selection that we've done for the pivot, this information is actually for the user themselves. So one thing that is happening in the background that you actually don't even see is that when we're actually launching the report, the system knows the user. It automatically authorizes them that they can view the report. Then it actually authorizes them on the information that they're allowed to see. So you're not going to even get information that you don't have the rights to view into the report. So what you see is what you have rights to, and then whatever customization that you make, pivot or some change, creating new elements and new tabs, that is part of your own personal space by default, and then you can actually share it with other users based on their username. So you can actually share reports as well that you customize. So this is actually very, very powerful with the kind of customization and reports that you can generate from the data that we have. Now, when it comes to bringing information into the system and pulling information out of the system, you'll notice that in a lot of the reports, or actually quite a lot of them, there's, if not all of them, we actually have this little Excel icon that you can actually use, and you'll notice it on every, pretty much every single tab that we have. Basically, it's the export button. And when you click on it, it's actually, what it's going to do is actually going to create an export. And it exports the view that you're looking at with the information that you have pulled out of the system, and it makes it available for you to download. Everything that we're doing with the export and import is actually asynchronous, so what it allows you to do is that when you click on an export, even if it's a very, very large export, so I don't know, 4,000 projects or 20,000 assignments, which will take some time to generate. Once you get that notification that the export is being generated for you, you just need to click OK on that message, and you can keep working with the application. You can actually even get out of the application altogether. When the export is ready, it's going to be available for you to download in your own download space, in your document space that is in the system backend. In this case, you'll notice that I have a project data that I've just exported in February 6, 2015, and it has the date and time, which is 12/41. I mean, the export that I've done here was very quick to generate. It took less than a minute. It probably took a few seconds. But some exports will take a few minutes, but that doesn't mean that the system is locked and you have to wait for it. You can actually do whatever you want, and when it's ready, you're going to get that notification if you're in the system. If you're not, when you're coming back in, there's going to be a notification that shows up in here. And then you can actually go ahead and download it. And then when you click download, you can actually save this thing into your machine or just open it, and it's going to open that information in Excel. So, and you'll notice that that export is available on pretty much every tab that we have that has information in it that you can actually go ahead and export it. The other thing that we have is that you can actually import information. Currently, we only support importing into the project scheduler, into the project Gantt, that you can actually import a Microsoft project file into it. So if you don't have a plan, it actually allows you to open a Microsoft project plan and load everything from it. It loads by default the tasks, the dependencies, and the assignments if it finds a match between the resource names that are assigned to the project and the resource names that you had in the Microsoft project. And then you can actually then work with it within the application itself. You don't have to work with it in the Microsoft project. So you could import the Microsoft project file. We will have in the later release, we will have the ability to import more information into the resource data tab. So you will be able to import information for the resources as changes to existing resources based on the resource key, as well as changes to the adding new resources, as well as to the projects. You will be able to add information to the to import information to both resources, projects, and asset forecast. It's not going to be available in the initial release. It will be available later on. The other thing that we have is that, so we spoke about it from the resource manager, functional manager, the somebody that is in charge of multiple projects, and then project manager, and we looked at some of the reports. We also have the ability for team members to actually go ahead and track their time. The team members can actually get also into the project, looking at the information that they need to do as far as risk and issues and work that they're supposed to do. And then they have the ability to actually put their actuals against the project, so they can actually track their work as well. And I'm just going to highlight some of the things that we have in the ability to track time. We do have the ability for managers to assume the role of the people that work for them. We're talking about the functional managers and resource managers. So then they can actually, if those people are not available to create their timesheets, they can create their timesheets. You can actually designate that right to specific people, so you don't have to be a functional manager to do that, but you can give specific people the ability to do that. So if somebody's not available to track the time and you want to lock a period for compliance reasons, you can actually do that as well. The time tracking capability gives you the ability to either track for the week, so for the whole period that you're looking at, or you can track for the days. What we've added also the ability is that as an administration function, you can actually hide the days. So for example, we can say, we don't really care about the details for the days. We only care for the total for the week element. So in that case, you can actually hide all the days. You're not going to actually see them. You're only going to see the week total, and then a person can just put the week total, and that's it, making it simpler to track time. You'll notice that we've added the dates into the column headers, those of you that have seen our system from before. And what it allows you also to do is that the system now, when it comes to time tracking, in the past it was mandatory that it will be Monday through Sunday. In the current version, it is using your fiscal week definition in the system. So when you define a fiscal week, if it is 14 days, then there'll be 14 days actually to time track. If it starts on a Sunday, then you'll start on a Sunday, not a Monday. If it starts on a Saturday, just as well. So it is actually using the fiscal weeks that you have defined in the system as the days for each one of those periods. And like I said, you can hide the periods, and you can have a week that is actually longer than 7 days. Another thing that we've done is actually you can hide the weekends. So by default, the weekends are enabled so people can track on the weekends, but you can actually hide them and make the weekends invisible for people to track time on. So those are some of the things that we've added to the time tracking element. Last thing that I'm going to talk about is the administration. So what we've done is that with this full administration capabilities now in the system, that you don't need, you can do everything from within the same client, as well as creating the users and defining them, assigning rights to the users, defining all those different lists. So for example, if we're looking at the customer list, you can actually go ahead and make changes to it. And by the way, those names that you see for the different lists, other than the user and overhead, and actually not even scale. So only the users and overhead are static names for list. Every other name that you see here for the list is actually fully customizable. So customer can be, it's basically just a field that defines the project, but you can have any list and you can call it anything you want. Project type is what we by default call domain, which has a target percent forecast allocation that you're looking for those different elements. It's a little bit different than a regular list, but you can call it anything you want. Like in this case, we call this project type, and we have different types associated with a percent allocation, and so on and so forth. So everything that you actually see here is fully customizable, and you can customize it for your organization so it looks really, really like your own information in the system.